great. Well, hey, let's try another start. Welcome to WYCD Wicked. That stands for What You Can Do. I apologize for the awkward start to the stream. Give me a moment while I stop the recording and start it again. All right. Welcome to the stream. I've just been talking to a dead microphone for 14 minutes. Now I've learned a valuable lesson. We have an exciting show for you today. I'm raring to go, so let's dive into it. Got a bunch of updates. Number one, a major development from Fulton County, Georgia, where it turns out the judge has issued something of a surprise ruling. The judge has said that they are going to release in the election fraud case the part of the findings of the grand jury, although they're going to restrict names. It's very interesting, and it does not bode well for Donald Trump. We're going to delve into that. Then Rebel headquarters has a hilarious development between Mitch McConnell and Rick Scott. As you may know, Rick Scott is one of actually many Republicans who has a plan to cut Social Security. But he was more blatant about it than most. He was more open about it than most, and to his detriment, he also had already made an enemy of Mitch McConnell. So we are going to see the fallout from that. Essentially, McConnell cutting Scott loose, and it doesn't bode well for his reelection chances. And then, on Morning Joe, the GOP is implored to stop being jerks in a segment that is, frankly, one of the most... I think it's a perfect example of GOP versus MAGA. And to that point, there's something I'd like to show you before we dive into the show proper. Have a look at this. This is, as I see it, the reality of our current political system. Because we do not have two parties, in my opinion, any longer in the United States. That was from back when nobody paid attention to politics. Now, we have an extremely active American voting public. More so than it has been in my lifetime, more so than I have ever heard of it being, frankly. As a result, we really aren't operating under a two-party system. We are operating under a four-party system. Here they are, as well as their ideologies. On the left, we have progressives and corporate Democrats. On the right, we have MAGA and the GOP. In other words, on the left, we have Democrats, and on the right, Republicans, and then the two factions therein. Notice, though, how the motivations, notice where the shared motivations are. And I think all coverage of these issues will become a lot more clear. On the left, honesty about social issues. On the right, their media and their politicians lie to their voters about social issues. I mean about everything. Conservatives historically have relied on being able to simply not tell the truth. They've relied on scapegoating minorities. On the left, you have the disadvantage of appealing to those minorities strategically. It's the disadvantage because I'll tell you, people don't like to hear that they're living in a country that is reliant upon racist systems. They don't like learning that they've benefited from a racist system. And yet, it is the truth for a lot of Americans. And the left is necessarily honest about that because much of their voting base are the people who suffer from those racist systems. That's a hell of a word, a phrase, racist systems. The result being they are necessarily honest about it, and therefore they have the burden of not being able to just pick a different scapegoat every day when one is no longer sufficient. But you have something that many people might find surprising, because there are shared issues between the most extreme ends of the group. On the bottom, on the two that are closer together, there is, of course, loyalty to corporations. Those are your, I'm sorry to say it, any cable news channel you've watched, any of the pundits on there. At the end of the day, even, God bless him, even Chris Hayes, they owe their fealty first and foremost to their paycheck. On the other side of that, though, and of course the GOP, come on, they don't believe in anything as written out there, other than getting rich. On the other side of that, though, you have an avenue, brothers and sisters, that we can proselytize on, because MAGA and progressives do have one thing in common. They are against the oligarchy. Why is lying about social issues so effective with MAGA? Because it plays on a genuine feeling they have. They genuinely, if you look at all MAGA interviews that are out there, one thing that is shared between them is a sense that they have been wronged. And yes, they do the aggrievement politics. Yes, they whine like babies about, any little piece of politeness they're asked to recognize, they're asked to participate in. Yes, they whine about that, but that is their way of venting a genuine grievance that most Americans feel. You'll note that the MAGA voters also tend not to be college educated compared to your standard GOP voters. They tend not to have as much money as your standard Republican voters. In other words, they are suffering under the same economic system that oppresses black people and brown people and everybody who's not already wealthy. And as a result, they are very much against rich folks in general. There's also the added reality that their politicians, the craziest of the crazy, they have a real hard time getting corporate funding as compared to your standard Republican, because who on earth would bet on crazy? So, end result is we have an avenue that we can proselytize in. Oh, yes. It's 2023. 2024 is a big election year. All election years are important, but 2024 is presidential, baby. That means we got to start preaching now. Because the closer we get to 2024, the more urgent it's going to get, the more difficult the sell will be. Whereas right now, we have the benefit of being able to do this through a series of polite conversations. That is a much easier environment to convert people into, or in which to convert people. So take a note of where there is overlap. Progressives and MAGA, they are against oligarchy. They are against rule by the rich. Use that to your advantage. Approach MAGA not based upon the social issues, because they have been lied to about the social issues. You will not be dealing with the same feeling of grievance. You will not be dealing with the same feeling of injustice. You will talk about the lies they've been told about social issues. And you will be trying to make them feel bad for the actual victims of these social issues and the lies about them. And they are just going, MAGA, that is to say, are just going to be saying, no, this is where I get to feel bad about me and my problems. This is my way to vent. These are the people I hate to feel better about the poor situation I'm in. It's not going to work. Instead, goal should be to team up with these people in the sense that we are just trying to get them to agree on financial issues who the bad guy is. Let the facts do a lot of the work for you, and do not present the facts yourself. That is to say, explain to them the broad overview when these things come up. For example, Social Security reforms. We're going to come back to this chart. You don't have to memorize all this right now. You'll see what I mean as we go on. But just take a note right now of where the loyalties lie, and more importantly, where the motivations lie. And try to understand the difference between progressives and corporate Democrats, MAGA, and the Grand Old Party. Those places where we overlap, those are our angles of approach when it comes to converting people to the progressive side. Those arrows, that's just the direction they need to take. You are unlikely to get somebody going from MAGA to progressive, but you can get somebody from supporting terrorism to perhaps being a centrist of some sort, and then do the work from there. Let's get into it. I am champing at the bit to bring you this Fulton County update. So here is Midas Touch talking about the latest updates from Fulton County, Georgia. Remember this chart. It will become relevant shortly.
I'm Ben Meiselas from the Midas Touch Network, and this is a breaking news alert. The Superior Court judge in Fulton County, Judge Robert McBurney, has ruled that portions of the special grand jury report that was created to make recommendations regarding criminal election interference into the 2020 election can be released and will be released on February 16th of 2023. However, based on the due process considerations of individuals whose indictments are likely to be imminent, the entire report will not be released. So let's dig into Judge McBurney's order right now. And what Judge McBurney says is the following. While there are these very significant due process considerations for individuals who may be indicted, whose names are in the report right now, we want to make sure that those individuals have all the due process rights afforded to them under the Constitution. However, pull this up right here. Judge McBurney says there are, however, 3 parts of the final report that are ripe for publication, meaning that there are 3 parts that Judge McBurney is going to release.
I do have to say, it makes me a little bit nervous, just a little bit, because I would happily wait another 2-3 weeks, another month, another 2 months, if it increased the odds that the actual conviction went through, if it was one less thing for this to get appealed on. That said, I got to say I agree with the judge's reasoning. The public does have an interest in this, and we can't tiptoe around the fact that it was an insurrection. It was multiple attempted coups in our country, or rather, it was a coup attempted multiple different ways. Yeah, the public certainly has an interest in this.
It goes on to say, they do not implicate the concerns raised in Thompson and Kelly. Thompson and Kelly, those italicized words, are cases that involve protecting the due process rights of people's names who appear in grand jury reports. Judge McBurney goes on to say, and while publication may not be convenient for the pacing of the district attorney's investigation, the compelling public interest in these proceedings and the unquestionable value and importance of transparency require their release. The judge goes on to then mention the 3 parts of the special grand jury's report that are going to be released. He says the following. These 3 portions include the introduction and conclusion to the final report, as well as Section 8, in which the special purpose grand jury discusses its concerns that some witnesses may have lied under oath during their testimony to the grand jury.
Okay. So, very, very interesting. Gotta right away say none of that would be an indictment of Donald Trump himself, because Donald Trump did not testify to that grand jury. But the introduction and the conclusion, great, especially the conclusion. I'm going to be interested in seeing that. It's coming out in a couple of days. I can't wait. Conclusion being recommendation. That's huge, and I think it's not really a secret what they recommended. The introduction also telling us a lot about the scope of what they're looking at after their investigation. So, the only other thing there, the judge thinks somebody lied under oath. Folks, that right there is handcuffs, jail cell time. That's big, and the folks that testified were not small fish. So it's going to be fascinating. Of course, the names will have been redacted, but I suspect we're going to be able to use some leaps of logic or rather some educated guesses as to who they are.
Because the grand jury does not identify those witnesses, the conclusions may be publicly disclosed at this time. So you see here, Judge McBurney's trying to balance what's in the public interest, even if the district attorney does not want it all released yet because of these due process concerns. However, at the same time, shielding the names of people who are mentioned in the report who the grand jury recommends to be criminally indicted. The conclusion of the judge's order says the following: therefore, consistent with the special purpose grand jury's recommendations made pursuant to OCGA section 15-12-80, that its final report be published. Those three portions of the report will be placed in the docket for this matter, making those excerpts, but only those excerpts, a court record on the 16th of February, 2023. The several-day delay will allow the district attorney's team to meet with the undersigned if necessary, to discuss logistics of publication, and to determine if any portion of those three parts of the final report should be redacted for other reasons, notice of which will be provided in the 16th of February 2023 docket entry. Finally, the court directs the district attorney's office to provide periodic updates on the progress of its investigation so the court can reassess if other parts of the special purpose grand jury's final report can properly be disclosed.
Ooh, Judge Burney. Ooh, yes, sir. That's what I like to hear. A big issue I have had with the American criminal justice system is that it seems to drag its feet anytime a rich person or a conservative needs punishment. Definite tendency to drag its feet. I don't think Fani Willis has shown any of the symptoms of corruption that are so common in the U.S., but I like seeing a judge saying, update me with how this is going, because I will release as much of this as I can without jeopardizing your case, because the public has an interest and therefore a right. They don't just have an interest as though the public's curious. The public has an interest, and then as in their interests are involved in this. The greater public does need to know this information. So I'm glad that Judge Burney is saying we're starting with this, the intro, the conclusion, and the fact that a couple of these witnesses might have lied, as in maybe their testimony was contradictory, meaning that one of them must have lied. Maybe. That's pure speculation. But point being, intro, conclusion, and the chunk where they believe somebody lied under oath, That's huge. And the judge saying, hey, update me as you go, because if I can release more of this, I'm going to. That is a very good sign. It also is a sign that charges might be right around the corner.
Consistent with the analysis set forth
An indictment, I should say.
above. And the analysis set forth above is the analysis in this 8-page order that Judge McBurney released saying, look, the special purpose grand jury that was impaneled in 2022 to investigate 2020 election interference, they voted. They made a recommendation to release their report regarding who they want to be criminally indicted. Just so you know, for those watching at home, in terms of the procedure here, the special purpose grand jury can make recommendations of indictment. Then those recommendations can go before another grand jury, which actually has the power to indict. So the special grand jury just prepares a report, doesn't have the power of indictment. Nonetheless, one of the things that Fani Willis had told Judge McBurney at the last hearing that took place a few weeks back was that indictments are imminent, meaning there's likely another grand jury impaneled that's utilizing this report as we speak to make a vote on those criminal indictments, to actually criminally indict the.
Somebody said they were going to punch me imminently, and 3 weeks passed, and my lip wasn't split. I would think they don't know what imminent means, but justice system apparently moves at a tedious pace.
Individuals who are mentioned in the report. Now, the special purpose grand jury made this recommendation to Judge McBurney that the report they prepared regarding who they believe engaged in criminal conduct, they want to release to the public. The Georgia statute uses the word shall, that if a recommendation is made by the special purpose grand jury, a judge shall, not may, shall release it. However, that has to be tempered by the constitutional due process rights to the individuals who may be criminally indicted. And one of the important points here that Judge McBurney points out, and this is where I think it's actually referring to Donald Trump. If we look at page 6 of 8 of Judge McBurney's order, he says these due process concerns are particularly important as they relate to individuals who may not have appeared before the special purpose grand jury. Who didn't appear before the special purpose grand jury, who a recommendation may have been made to indict that individual? Donald Trump. So this is what it specifically says. Judge McBurney writes, this is particularly true, the due process concerns, that is, if the grand jury's final report includes recommendations involving individuals who never appeared before the grand jury and so had no opportunity, limited or not, to be heard. The court goes on to say, the constitutionally protected due process rights of anyone who may be named in the final report requires this outcome. So
I kind of wonder if we're going to get another individual one situation. Like in Michael Cohen's court transcripts or whatever the heck, Donald Trump was referred to as individual one, whose campaign for president was eventually successful. Wonder if it's going to be like that, where his identity is protected, but come on.
So to me, when I read that, my red sirens went off and said that's probably referring to Donald Trump there as well. And then I thought there was this important footnote 2, which talks about the process of releasing the names and when the full report would ultimately be released. This is what footnote 2 says. That's why you got to dig, into these orders to really get the full context here. Later, this is footnote 2, later, when the criminal investigation is complete and an indictment has been obtained, the wiretap application and the search warrant affidavit do become part of the court record through discovery and pretrial litigation. At that point, the public's right of access accrues. The special purpose grand jury's final report is no different.
Wait a minute. I missed this. Later, when the criminal investigation is complete, and the wiretap application. Well, that's going to be some fascinating reading. The wiretap application. I do wonder whose wires got tapped, because I can tell you the GOP has a motor mouth problem. And historically, they've been real bad when it comes to saying stuff over the phone, over email, or just recording themselves for some freaking reason. Boy, I can't wait to read that. Whew.
Different. So comparing this to other grand jury processes, which usually take place in secret, and when does that information become public? And what the court is saying later, when criminal investigation is complete and an indictment has been obtained, the wiretap application and the search warrant affidavit become part of the court record through discovery, and then the public gets access to that same thing with the special purpose grand jury's report. And so to summarize it very quickly, portions of the special purpose grand jury's report recommending criminal indictments is going to be released. However, portions which actually state the name of the people who are recommended to be indicted are not going to be released. It's going to be limited to 3 parts that are set forth in the court's order that do not implicate due process concerns. This is the introduction and the conclusion, and Section 8, which talks about the grand jury's view that some of the witnesses committed perjury, but that portion does not list the actual names of the witnesses who the grand jury believes committed perjury.
Man. So just a wild development. We are going to get just a peek at what is going on in Fulton County, Georgia. I cannot wait. I can't wait. It doesn't get much better than that, except for when we actually have Trump on the stand testifying and lying his ass off and just getting schooled by the prosecutors. Baby, it sounds like that's coming. Can't you just imagine it, though? Trump's defense attorney in the background like, no, stop talking. Stop. No, don't do that. Oh, I can't wait. I can't wait. Have you seen him on the stand? He is terrible. He gets absolutely annihilated because he is in a room with people that are smarter than him. In other words, any standard room he's ever been in. But it's got the added appeal of they're adversarial to him. And boy, he is not used to getting his ass whipped in any sort of fair fight. It's delightful. Let him finish
This
up.
will be released. These 3 portions are going to be part of the public record. They're going to be released on February 16th of 2023, so it's coming up this week. Separately,
Thursday.
The Fulton County District Attorney, Fani Willis, is being told, report back to me, Judge McBurney. Let me know your status, because the reason I'm not releasing the full report is the due process concerns, because you're telling me you are about to start criminally indicting people, and we want to protect the integrity of the criminal investigation. But if anything changes, let me know. So
Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. So, in summary, as Ben Meiselas has just said, Ben Meiselas, aka Knock 'em Out Pete, a hell of a broadcaster there, has just said we are expecting on Thursday at least a portion of the grand jury report to be released, unless Fani Willis says, please do not do it, here's why, and she makes a good case. But it does seem like the judge is inclined to give the public as much information as possible, and that is delightful to see. There is, however, something you can do. I know it seems like, this, we got it, right? It's, what else is there? Well, that's one state. This SOB tried to overturn Joe Biden's wins in 7 states. Now, 2 of them have state-level investigations going on. If you are in Arizona, New Mexico, Nevada, Pennsylvania, or Wisconsin, good news. You can take a chunk out of this guy, too. Donald Trump tried to overturn your vote if you live in one of those states. Doesn't even matter if you voted for him. He tried to make your vote irrelevant if you live in one of those states. Link in the description, folks. Contact your attorney general and say, where's our state investigation? There's a district attorney in Georgia who's got the guts to go after this guy. The attorney general in Michigan has the guts to go after this guy. They care about their constituents' votes. Why don't you care about my vote? Their answer, if they deign to answer you, will be that they are allowing the federal yada, yada, yada. They don't want to interfere with yada, yada, yada. But we already have the attorney general in Georgia giving the okay to Fani Willis, to what degree he had to. We have the attorney general in Michigan going full steam ahead with a state investigation into the false elector plot. There is not an excuse. Why would you want a state investigation in addition to the federal investigation? Well, number one, federal investigation sure taking its time. How many years do we have to wait? Should Donald Trump get elected again? Is it going to take all the way through 2024? And then, well, we got to let him serve his term. We can't indict a sitting president. But Merrick Garland will push up his glasses and say, when he gets out, then I'm going to write a strongly worded letter. No. No. Justice deferred is justice denied. Don't wait. Then there's that other issue. Federal investigation is not going to include everybody who is involved in those states. It's just not. It's a lot of work. Wouldn't you rather have 7 separate teams working on this, getting everyone who was involved in this coup? I sure would. If you are from one of the 5 states up there that doesn't have a check mark next to it, get a check mark next to it. I would love to add to that list. Go get them. Let's look back at our list here. This right here. We don't know whether it was MAGA or GOP types that got roped into that investigation. But I can tell you, if there was lying done, it's probably done by MAGA, because they are dumb as a sack of rocks. They have had every opportunity to just run away with American elections in the last 4 years, 5 years. Gosh, what are we on, 6 now? Because Democrats weren't used to fighting. They weren't used to having an actual fight. What had happened back when we were a pure 2-party system? Corporate Dems and GOP had a nice little scam going where they got bribed by the same people and pretended to fight, virtually guaranteeing that although some social progress would creep along, the main cause of all of our woes, the economic injustice in this country, would never get addressed. Ever. Then suddenly, an outlier got elected. Donald Trump got elected, finally. And it was a nightmare, because it was the guy from the party that lies about social issues. Incidentally, their leaders are happy to bow down to corporations. They're happy to sell out Americans to corporations. But their voters need to be sold on the social issues and not the oligarchy. So what did we get? Of course, the person from that top row there that got elected was from MAGA, because they don't actually have principles. Therefore, they weren't actually going to mess with the corporations. The good news for us is that the Donald Trump is so blatant, such an obvious criminal, that it woke a whole lot of people up. It got a whole lot of people real interested in politics. And now a lot of us do see the system for what it is, and we can take advantage of this. We can also take advantage of the fact that the people who are voting for MAGA have consistently voted some of the dumbest people I have ever seen into office. Stand by while I pull this up. There we are. So, MAGA really doesn't like things that hurt them in exchange for anything. Top of that list is going to be Social Security cuts. With this new dumb crop of politicians, actually Rick Scott's been in office for a minute, but with the new dumb crop of politicians, you also have a lack of political finesse, which has been just delightful to watch and has resulted in the embarrassment that was the State of the Union shouting match that took place and put a spotlight on the GOP's most sensitive issue. Most sensitive because it is the most blatant screwing of their own political base that they engage in. The loyalty to an oligarchy, where the rich are never asked to pay their share, was on full display when Rick Scott's plan was just spoken frankly about by Joe Biden. Here's the result of that.
Well, unfortunately, that was the Scott plan. That's not a Republican plan. That was the Rick Scott plan.
It's quite another thing for us to just hear Mitch McConnell kill another Republican senator. Kill him.
So Rick Scott's really not back in the fold yet after he ran against you for leadership?
Well, this doesn't have anything to do with that. I mean, it's just a bad idea. I think it will be a challenge for him to deal with this in his own reelection in Florida, a state with more elderly people than any other state in America.
Indicating that, he's going to have a tough time getting reelected carrying his own baggage.
All right, so for a little background, Rick Scott challenged McConnell for leadership in the Senate. Didn't go so well. He didn't get it. McConnell didn't really let that go. He just sort of held on to that, remembered that happened, and waited for a moment just such as this. Because right now the GOP needs a fall guy, and it would appear that's Rick Scott. Amazing. Do not be confused, though. Rick Scott is not an outlier amongst Republicans. He's not like the only one who said, let's get rid of Social Security. He's getting thrown under the bus. He's real familiar of what the underside of that particular public transportation vehicle looks like at this moment. But that doesn't mean he was the only one. There's also, who is there? There's Paul Ryan. Remember that guy? Entitlement reform was one of his big issues. Lindsey Graham. Mike Lee. The guy going, when Joe Biden was saying that that's exactly what they wanted to cut with Social Security. Mike Lee was a man who said, I am going to pull Social Security up by the roots. He was boisterous about it. Just didn't know he was being recorded at the time. Michael Waltz, yet another one. The Republicans have always been trying to get rid of Social Security. But I gotta say, if someone's getting thrown under the bus, it's delightful to have it be Rick Scott, because he is loathsome.
That's an amazing statement from Mitch McConnell, who knows what he's doing every single second of his professional political life. He knows what he's doing.
President Biden also knows what he's doing, and that means holding up Republican Senator Rick Scott as the face of the GOP.
Senator from Florida wants to put Social Security and Medicare in the chopping block every 5 years. I find to be somewhat outrageous, so outrageous that you might not even believe it. I guarantee you, it will not happen. I will veto it. I know that a lot of Republicans, their dream is to cut Social Security and Medicare. Well, let me say this. If that's your dream, I'm your nightmare.
But again, for
Dark Brandon. Oh, I love when he makes an appearance. Ooh, I love it.
Republican Senator Rick Scott, it's a double nightmare. President Biden and Mitch McConnell. President Biden opening fire on a Republican senator is not a big surprise. But when a Republican Senate leader hammers away on another Republican senator or kills him, as Mike Barnacle said, that's huge. Well, everybody, I'm David Schuster.
So yes, David Schuster with TYT there. I really like whenever this guy's on. I don't really have any sense of what his publishing schedule is like, but I like when TYT books him to talk about stuff because he breaks it down wonderfully. We're gonna keep going with it for a little bit, but let's just talk about one issue. Every time the GOP tries to defend why they are trying to cut Social Security, they do the following two-step process. Number one, they straight up lie and say their goal is not to cut Social Security. That is a lie, because oh boy, do they approach it from all kinds of different angles, and oh boy, do they call it all kinds of different things other than what they're doing. Step two is they say, well, we can't pay for it. We just can't afford it. In fact, we're saving Social Security. We're saving it because otherwise it's not going to have any money. And then what do? What they don't mention is the fact that there is a $160,000 cap right now on income that is taxable to Social Security. As in, get this, everybody who makes $160,000 or less has 100% of their income taxable to Social Security to some degree. Or rather, they have to pay the Social Security tax on that income. But if you make more than $160,000 a year, I think it's at $161 now. If you make more than $160,000 a year, every dollar after that is not taxable for Social Security. If that doesn't make any sense to you, congratulations, you are not a Republican politician. You have the interests of the country in mind. You have a fair country in mind. You think that a country should be run decently and that the poor people should not take the greater burden. GOP feels very differently. They do not want people who are already rich to have to pay their fair share. It's that simple. In other words, the simple answer to all the whining the GOP does about Social Security: raise the cap. Don't put a cap on taxable income at all. I will also point out, we've had the percentage of Americans that are billionaires and millionaires grow significantly over time, meaning that more Americans are rich, which means a lot more Americans have to be poor. That's what they call a shrinking middle class. We are experiencing a shrinking middle class. Oh, hell, I've actually got it, I'm sure. Yeah. Let's have a look, literally, at the shrinking middle class. Right, yeah. Christ, that's not it. Although that is, in and of itself, an interesting little graph. Going to have to be faster. U.S. income by class. Excellent. All right. This is our shrinking middle class. Right around 2008, you might remember that as a certain financial crisis, a collapse of the housing market. They made that movie The Big Short about it. Yeah, that's when the upper income, the percentage of the money made in the United States belonged more to people in the upper income overall than to the people in the middle class. Lower income have always gotten the short end of the stick, but we lost our middle class majority of the income holders in 2008. Well, all those people in the upper income, after $160,000, none of those dollars pay for Social Security. Make that abundantly clear. to your Republican voting friends. Make it very clear that the reason we are en route to having trouble paying for this is the greed of rich people, plain and simple. If you want to contact your representative about it, I would recommend you say, remove the cap. Don't just raise the cap. Get rid of the cap on Social Security taxable income. And if you are in a position where that would mean you get taxed more, I congratulate you on your life. You've made a lot of great financial decisions. You've weathered a lot of horrible financial storms. I congratulate you. Pay your damn taxes. Let's let this man continue because he's on a roll as well.
And thanks for joining us. Republicans are being reminded in brutal political fashion that Social Security and Medicare are highly charged lightning rods. They are deeply popular programs and keep tens of millions of Americans out of poverty. They are also government-run, and that drives Republicans crazy. Many GOP lawmakers simply cannot fathom that a government program, except maybe the U.S. military, would be effective or helpful. So countless Republicans dream of privatizing Social Security and having the money invested by private banks in, say, the stock market. When the stock market drops, as it sometimes does, well, that would just be too bad for seniors who had been depending on their funds. But never mind all of that. Republicans also like to attack Social Security and Medicare over an issue called solvency. To be clear, it is true that within the next decade, with no changes, Social Security will start giving out more money than it will have on hand. Now, according to most Republicans, there are only two ways to fix that and protect the solvency of Social Security. We either have to raise the retirement age or cut benefits.
Raise the retirement age. Just crossing their fingers and hoping enough Americans die before it's time to collect their checks. Ridiculous. That's what the GOP is.
Either approach would cut the amount that Social Security has to pay out. But lost in the GOP claims and fear-mongering.
Oh, and of course, cutting benefits. So making it a worse program. It would never occur to them to tax the rich.
Bring over Social Security.
I'm kidding. Of course it occurs to them. That's what they're trying to avoid.
Is another approach, a proposal that actually has broad appeal when it's asked in public polls. The idea is that you increase the amount of money going into Social Security on the front end by having wealthy Americans contribute more.
There
As it stands, only the first $150,000 or so of income is subject to Social Security taxes. If you make $200,000, you pay the same Social Security taxes as somebody with an income of $150,000. Likewise, if your income is $500,000 a year or $1 million or more, you still only pay Social Security taxes on the first $150,000. The ceiling gets raised a little each year to account for inflation. However, a growing number of experts have proposed raising the ceiling to, say, $1 million. By all accounts, somebody who makes $1 million will not have trouble paying their Social Security taxes.
Here's a question. Why stop at $1 million? Why stop at any amount of money? Past $1 million, that's made in 1 year. $1 million made in 1 year. I haven't made $1 million in 10 years. To make $1 million in a single year, you do not need help with your taxes. In fact, you ought to be paying a hell of a lot more. I'm going to push it farther than this handsome gentleman in a suit and suggest we say no more cap. No more cap. Social Security, too important. If we really need to help the rich, if they really need another multi-billion-dollar bailout so they can buy more of their own stock, if they really need that, we'll discuss it. How about this? We'll put it up for review and vote on it. I think Rick Scott would enjoy that. He seems to like putting things up for review and voting on it. But in the meantime, that money is not money that they need. That is all extra money. Take it. Not even all of it. Just make it subject to the same taxes that 100%, statistically speaking, of your money and my money already is subject to. Just make them pay the same kinds of taxes we do. They'll be fine. If they have to sell their third yacht, I'll weep for them. But they got to pay their taxes.
But Republicans hate the idea of making the wealthy contribute even more, especially to a government program. So you have a few Republicans like Senator Scott and Senator Mike Lee who propose making changes. And then when President Biden calls them out on their efforts to cut or privatize Social Security, the Republicans say, that's not our plan, that is Senator Scott's plan. Whatever. President Biden is owning the Republicans by highlighting their extreme views. Dirk Brandon, you better believe it. And it's working.
All right, so remember this. You might note it is more of a grand old party thing, being loyal to corporations, the oligarchs, etc., to want to chop Social Security. That is another avenue of support you have with MAGA folks. Now, don't get it twisted. Matt Gaetz, he's a MAGA guy. He's all for hacking into Medicaid, hacking into Social Security. You will not find MAGA politicians giving a full-throated support of Social Security. You know what? Anytime you say anything about MAGA, they'll do the opposite. They don't really have a political compass. They'll do whatever savage thing they can. But the point is, you have people who will be inclined to hearing arguments based upon something like that, taxing the ultra-wealthy a lot more. Just call it George Soros, and they'll be salivating to tax that mother effer. GOP voters, this is one of the rare issues you can communicate to them directly on. I'm talking about the people who curl their lips at MAGA because, they don't like all that impoliteness, and they haven't been experiencing the same trauma that the MAGA folks, by and large, have, even though they've been reacting to it in a very despicable way that reveals their lack of character. Nonetheless, those GOP voters, the happy, healthy suburbanites, you can sure appeal to them with that talk about Social Security. You can say, look, Rick Scott's coming for it. Lindsey Graham's coming for it. Kevin McCarthy, he's lying to you if he says he's not coming for it, because his pal Paul Ryan, who had the job he has now before him, he was coming for it. You can switch them to the corporate Dem side a hell of a lot easier just by saying, look, you're going to get the same middle-of-the-road stuff that you would have gotten with the GOP if you vote for a Biden type, except they're going to leave your Social Security alone. It's an avenue of attack. Use it. Absolutely use it. That is a rare issue where you can appeal to the entirety of the right wing, because I can't stress enough, the ages on this, on who the GOP voters are, does not suggest that that is a party which ought to be playing around with Social Security at all. No, sir, they should not. So take advantage of it. Do what Biden did. Hold up the cold, hard facts into the light of day. Let them see it. Also, play inside man. When you find an issue, for example, the Social Security, you find an issue that they care about and you care about. You both mutually agree that you want to do this. You want to protect this thing. Play it up like it's an alliance between you two. And in fact, it is an alliance between you two. You don't need to get them voting for your candidate. You just need to get them working with you. Have them contact their representative. Let's say it's your wacky uncle, and he relies on that Social Security, but otherwise he's all for the rest of the GOP thing. Don't try to get him voting for Biden. Just say, look, I'll tell my representative that I want them to support Social Security. You tell your representative the same thing. Let's both do it. You don't have to switch your vote. Just tell them. Threaten them if you have to threaten them that you'll switch your vote. Be careful with GOP folks. But say, look, Unc, just contact them. You know, like when you get furious about Mexicans at the border or whatever the heck. Take that energy you normally have for that, and this time when you write your racial slur-laden email, mention that you would prefer they not touch Social Security. You can bond over that. You can get them used to the idea of agreeing with you over their savior in politics, whoever their state-appointed golden cow is. Get them used to that idea. And you might find that down the road, they are more receptive to maybe hearing what else you have to say. Take advantage of these opportunities every chance you get. I would like to show you now the absolute best example of this chart playing out in action right in front of the cameras. This is MSNBC, and they are, yes, okay. This is MSNBC talking about the general tenor of the GOP these days.
The Republican gamble, and I don't know that this is quite as conscious as I'm about to say, but there is an enormous amount of cultural upset, and it doesn't have to attach to anything in specific. You can be mad about critical race theory with no idea what critical race theory is. It doesn't matter. It's a free-floating emotion, and it attaches to things. And we're going to try to channel those emotions by giving words to feelings, but not connecting those feelings to any material thing. And that's going to be the experiment. Do the things matter, or do the feelings matter?
Yeah, and you know, Willie, I talked to a Republican strategist, a top Republican strategist for the election, bragging about the number of mail pieces that candidates were sitting out about trans athletes. Just one after another after another.
All right, real quick. So, mail pieces going out about trans athletes. It's going to be a MAGA thing. But keep on listening for a moment.
I just sat and listened. I was like, okay. And then I thought, well, but there's only 0.003% of Americans who identify as trans. And you're, okay, that's fine. So out of 322 million Americans, okay, so you're focusing on 0.0003% of Americans. That's like most of the mail pieces you're sending out. What are you doing for the other 321 million Americans? And they're just clueless to it. It's own the libs, own the libs. They never think about actually helping middle-class Americans.
Yeah, and Donald Trump actually just yesterday, to your point, Joe, put out a new document where he says if he's reelected, he will curb transgender rights. So he's playing that game as well. And Sam Stein, what David's talking about here leads politicians to a place of what's the thing I'm supposed to say? What's the right thing? What signal should I give off to do things like mocking Paul Pelosi being attacked with a hammer during an assassination attempt of the Speaker of the House? Some of them backed away from it, but the reflex now is, what is the thing I can say to please that small group of people, to please the base?
Yeah, I mean, Republican politics has grown increasingly online in the past couple of years. I mean, you go through the list, but about a year and a half ago, we were talking about Dr. Seuss as a problem. We've talked about M&Ms, the gender of the M&Ms being a problem. For a while, there was gas stoves and the potential that they're being outlawed being a problem.
So hold on a sec. Joe Biden's apparently not going to help trans folks. That sounds like a guy picking his political battles, and I think poorly. But what they are getting at is the preponderance of nonsense that the GOP is now built upon in order to keep lying about why they are doing what they are doing. To keep this nonsense going, they have had to build up fictitious enemies. And now they have a huge chunk of their voting constituency that is fully on board for these issues. And they have told them that it's not the corporations, it's not the rich people. It's all of these scapegoats we've been presenting you with. And now you have MAGA salivating to attack them. This is, again, something we can take advantage of. And it's not to say, hey, look, trans people are your friends. Gay people are your friends. We'll get to that. We'll get to that. But they have anger right now. The one thing they have been clear about is they're angry. They're not really sure about what. I don't know how many of those embarrassing interviews you've seen, but they don't really know, and they know they don't know, and they know you know they don't know. But they have been clear about the fact that they're angry, so use that. All you got to do, point their anger at the right people. Don't tell them, hey, you're a racist, when they say some racist. Okay, if they say something racist, tell them, that's racist, please don't do that. But point is not to put them in a defensive mindset. Point is to put them against the correct people and trust that the rest will happen. There's a guide, link in the description, to talking to MAGA voters. It's from thevimblog.com. I actually put two guides in there. This one I like. It was from 2020, and it was in preparation for the 2020 election. I'm giving you this now a year early, so you can have multiple of these conversations. Every time something like this comes up, and it becomes a dinner table conversation or a living room conversation or a couple of beers out back conversation. Try to sneak this in. Diverse news consumption is important. Just get them peeking at some non-Fox News. Their support for immigration restriction isn't based on economic concerns. Social media has had a negative impact on politics. There isn't a good reason to give wealthy people a tax cut. Really stress that, because for MAGA, that is going to hit harder. There is not a good reason to give wealthy people a tax cut. We should think for ourselves and not be unquestioning followers of parties or leaders. You don't have to get them agreeing with your side. Just get them to admit that they should not agree with their own side 100% of the time. And by the way, neither should you. One of the things I aspire to do on this channel is to have extraordinarily friendly and polite debates with the left. Why? Because I want to get people used to the idea of thinking critically, of questioning the side they're already on. Not to hurt that side, but to make it better. And the cool thing about MAGA is you do hurt it by making it better. Because right now MAGA is just about the worst ideology I could fathom. So any improvement that happens to it is going to change it into something that is unrecognizable. Whereas when you're a progressive, the constant debate, the constant bettering of our opinions is helpful. It preserves what we are. It doesn't destroy it. It does the opposite. Tell them, try to sneak in that democracy and voting in general is a good thing, that they have more in common with poor people of color than with wealthy people of any pigmentation. Really hammer that home. Political discourse is broken and we lack a shared set of facts. So be important. Allow them to fact check you. If you got something wrong, be first to admit it. It's okay if, by the way, you go into a debate thinking you're going to knock this out of the park, and then you find out one of your core beliefs was mistaken. You know what you do? You don't have to ditch your entire belief system right then. All you do is say, oh, well, this is news to me. I'm gonna digest this. Thank you for pointing it out. It's going to be a win for you because they're going to show up to play the game again. They're going to like that feeling. They're going to show up to play the game again. And you will have exposed one of your own weaknesses, and then you can go correct it. You can go get educated. I promise you, if you are a progressive, you have not been intentionally lied to. You're about the only political party which has nothing to fear from staring at the cold, hard facts. Owning your political opponent isn't productive, as we just said. Polarization and negative partisanship are bad. Absolutely. Show rather than tell that. Be kind to them, even though they're saying some of the stuff that would make the devil blush. Be kind to them anyway. Be cordial, because your goal is to convert. brothers and sisters, you're here to proselytize. Trump looks down on his supporters. That's not going to be hard to do. It suggests you be inquisitive. Start by simply taking the Trump supporter to fill out the detail, asking the Trump supporter to fill out the details of their thinking. This is huge. Ask questions. When they say the gay frogs are causing COVID, say, "Oh, okay. I wasn't aware of that. What? Where did you come to that conclusion?" Just take what they say totally seriously, but ask them questions like you would a progressive bringing you a set of facts. Would you just take it as gospel, or would you ask for their reasoning? Would you want to see some sources? Would you want to hear out the details of their argument? Do the same thing. I have seen Trump supporters get embarrassed and change their minds on the spot, not about their whole philosophy, but about one issue that they seemed very passionate about a moment ago, simply by being taken seriously. It's probably right that the initial reaction was to treat them like angry children. But when you have adults acting not like adults, in mass, you do have to start questioning why that is. And it's just a bad reaction to a real problem, which is the middle class has shrunk and become grass. Pause over assertions like this and ask how. Pause over assertions and ask how we know they are true. So you don't have to derail the whole conversation, but when they say gay frogs, COVID, whatever, like, well, how do you know that's the case? And then you can, of course, say, let's come back to that later. I want to hear more about what we agreed to focus on. So in the beginning, decide what you're going to talk about and stick to that. A common move that even now the followers of politicians do is gish gavel and change the subject. Here's the general principles. Show emotion like care and sadness, not anger and frustration. Don't be combative. Educate yourself. You don't need to know everything about everything, but have a basic understanding of what you're going to talk about if you choose to begin that political conversation. Be ready to supply a story, testimonial, or account that explains your support for your non-Trump candidate. Do not phrase it as an attack on the Trump supporter. Most of the advice in the guide that is linked in the description involves just listening and responding. If you are a good listener, or you believe you can be a good listener when you try, you're going to have a huge advantage, because that's going to be most of what this is. Asking simple questions after listening closely. Set the terms of the discussion at the outset, however. Say explicitly that you want to focus on ideas. Emphasize that everyone must cite reliable facts. That is huge. So you agree that you won't just pull something out of freedomeagle.net or whatever, nor can they. Emphasize that everyone must be willing to change their views, and this is huge, including you. Including you. Don't be afraid of this. This is essentially the soul of what being a progressive is. And I think you'll find, even if your views do change over the course of discussing this or that, it's going to change for the better, because progressives adapt to facts like everyone should. Don't repeat popular talking points. This is huge, and this is the hardest habit to break, because you will have heard things phrased the same way so many times. Don't do that. Don't say tax the rich, or don't say eat the rich. Don't say defund the police. Don't say the big, obvious catchphrase talking points, because they will have already prepared for that. They will then just spout off their own retort, which they heard Tucker Carlson say, and neither of you will actually be thinking for yourselves. Keep yourself lucid, keep yourself creative, stay on your toes, and phrase things as you would conversationally. Instead of saying tax the rich, say, like, look, I just want rich people to pay at least as much in terms of a percentage of their tax as I do. I think that's fair, given that they have more money overall. And then relatedly, do not use labels or terms that have been stigmatized by right-wing media. Politically correct terms like oppressed, microaggression, trigger warning, white supremacy, privilege, yada, yada, yada. Terms like socialism, unions, and feminism count too. Just, look, if you're talking about these concepts, that's fine. There's a reason we have phrases for these. It's to shorten it up for people that already know. But for people who have only been trained to react to these things but not think about them, that is how you will shut their brain off. So don't do it. Rephrase it. If you understand it, you'll be able to rephrase it. If you find you can't rephrase it, that's where the education comes in. Go on, get yourself educated until you can talk about it in a conversational way. Do not call them a racist or a bigot, even if they're being a little bit racist. Don't do it. It will immediately end all productive conversation. And they go on with great advice. Fight the urge to destroy the person you're talking to or eviscerate or whatever. If you feel a disagreement coming, slow down, return to a previous shared value. Remember that chart. Go back to where you relate with them. If it's MAGA, which it most likely will be because they're going to be, believe it or not, the easiest converts, it's that the rich people have more of their money than they deserve. Forget that. Even say, look, your boss and people like your boss get more of the benefit for your work than you do. And that's been going on for decades and decades, and that has led, in my opinion, to the majority of the problems we experience now. There's a lot of different ways it shows up in society, but I feel the problem eventually comes down to the people who already have a lot of money have too much of it. It's that simple. But bring it back to your shared value. Wherever that shared value is, and if you're talking to them in a friendly way, there must be at least one. Bring it back to that if you feel the disagreement cropping up. Now I have a somewhat alarming theory, still regarding this chart. The arrows on that chart. Here's my pet theory. I don't think that's going to stay like that for too many more election cycles. Why is that? MAGA isn't terribly bright. They don't have any real guiding principles beyond being angry at the world and lashing out. And as we saw with Marjorie Taylor Greene, and as we saw with the debacle in the House of Representatives just getting McCarthy elected, I mean, they're like the Keystone Cops. They're not. One, they're an embarrassment, and two, they don't have the savviness to. Let me get into it in a second, but they don't have the savviness to be effective candidates. To be fair, a lot of that's just because they're brand new. They're a new ideology that's burst onto the scene. They don't have the experience. So they fall for easy traps like that. They don't know how to react in a situation like that. They're not familiar with the consequences. I don't think that is a sustainable party. I think this next election, if you and I do our jobs right, that's going to be where we see the collapse of the GOP. Now, they might keep the name, but I think all the people with sense in the GOP are going to join the corporate Democrats, which is going to push the Democrats way more to the right because they have shown they are willing to hold the door open for the worst scum of the universe. So we're going to have MAGA simply becoming the GOP, the existing GOP, your traditional Republicans, going to corporate Democrats. The people who get fed up with that, they're going up to progressives. Why is this relevant now? Get used to pulling Democrats towards the progressive side of things. Use the fact that we are both honest about social issues and that it's really just a matter of the timeline and that the drastic steps we're willing to take. Use that to proselytize. Will it be important in this coming election? Not really in terms of the presidential, although depending on what state you're in, you're going to have an opportunity to get a few more genuine progressives in Congress. But for the presidential, no. But play the long game. Learn from our enemies. McConnell waited a real long time to get revenge on Rick Scott, and boy, did he get revenge. He appears to be hanging Rick Scott out to dry. Use that. Play the long game. Get used to converting corporate Democrats to progressives with the knowledge that the new right wing, if America survives, is likely to be made up more of Democrats than people calling themselves GOP. And worst case scenario, even if that doesn't come to pass, even if MAGA fades away and people calling themselves Republicans are more or less the same crop of people they were in 2015, well, those people were still trying to get Social Security gone too. So it will be helpful to us to pull as many people into the progressive side of politics as we can. Use these overlapping principles. Use these shared values between MAGA, between corporate Dems. Use them to proselytize. And if you can get the occasional GOP voter to see the light, great. It's a harder fight, but it's doable. Well, I've had a wonderful time. Let's have a look at some of these comments. Great news and good job. Franny P says, great news and good job telling folks what they can do to move these cases on a per-state basis forward. Thank you, Franny. I'm excited for it. I believe everybody out there has the ability to affect American politics and should use it. If you are not in one of the 5 states listed, also link in the description, you can check them out there. That's okay. Still contact the DOJ. Still put pressure on Merrick Garland to do his GD job already. Jeff Taylor says, great news, referring to the upcoming release on Thursday of some of the grand jury's findings in Fulton County. Boy, I can't wait. I cannot wait. We're going to have a heck of a stream reading that together. On a related note, it's time to chop this baby up, so I am going to get going. I do hope you'll consider giving me a like if you haven't already, and a subscribe if you'd like to hear more. This show deals with what you can do about politics in the United States. Broadly, it's around the world, but we also deal these days quite a bit with the United States. So hopefully you enjoyed it, and I will see you next time.